Steve Lillywhite speaks up even though nobody asked him to. I do get your emails, DMB family. Welcome to the morning show vlog. A lot of emails like this one from Cody here, who says, "Hey, Ann, have you seen Steve Lillywhite's recent tweets about the Dave Matthews Band new album Come Tomorrow? Check it out. What do you think? Do you agree, disagree? Thank you for your time." Thank you, Cody, and everybody else who emailed just like this. Let's take a look at what Steve Lillywhite had to say on Twitter. "Come Tomorrow. I have listened to it, and there was a reason DMB became great, and one of the reasons was Leroy and Boyd. So this album will only ever be 3/5 as good as it used to be. That is the power of a great band." It's cliche to say, but my mom raised me that if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything at all. I feel like this is the case a lot of times with Twitter. Now, I'm of two things here. One, this is how the guy feels. So if that's how you feel, great. I put out a lot of stuff on the morning show with Anthony vlog here. By the way, thumbs up, always appreciated. Make sure you subscribe. Check out our other Dave Matthews Band videos. It'll be up in wherever the corner is. We do a lot. We got a lot on the DMB band, a lot on the DMB family, a lot of support. Thank you guys for that. Steve is absolutely, welcome to his opinion. Not going to disagree with somebody's opinion. If that's how the guy feels about it, then great. He's obviously put some time and consideration into this. Somebody tweeted him, "You just listened to it for the first time? If so, why the wait?" And his response was, "Wanted to let it sink in." So clearly, he's been letting it sink in for a few months now. So again, it's his right to his opinion. Not arguing that. But my point is, if you don't have anything constructive to say or to bring to the argument, why even say it? And this is my argument with a lot of people on Twitter to begin with. Like, if you're not contributing to the overall conversation with anything insightful or new, why are you talking? You're telling me, you're basically illustrating to me that there's only 3 original members in the band, so the album can only be 3/5 as good as the original. Like, what? I'm aware. I know what's going on in the band. I'm well aware of the situation. By the way, this got a response from one of the members of the band, which was great. And I'll tell you what that is in a sec. But, it's like if he were to go on Twitter and be like, "The sky is blue and we need oxygen to live." Well, okay. Why are you on my timeline? Why are you wasting my time with this? Again, if you have nothing nice to say or nothing, new or insightful to contribute, then what are you contributing? You need to be here presenting the argument that because this is only 3/5 of the original band, this can only be 3/5 as good as the original material. Well, all right. I mean, who's going to argue with that? But it doesn't need to be said is the point. And I feel, this is personal opinion here, that it looks sour on the part of Steve Lillywhite, because we all now know that Come Tomorrow was an amalgamation of 12 years worth of material. And it really was a reunification of all of the past DMB collaborators, from Rob to Mark to all engineers, producers, everything, except for one, and that was him. So, if I'm Steve Lillywhite's pal and I'm sitting there with him and he goes, "Hey, Aunt, look at this tweet I'm about to send out," the first thing I'm saying to Steve is, "Steve, this looks like sour grapes if you say this because you weren't a part of it." It's really easy to be like, "Hey, that thing that I didn't do? That sucks." And to me, Steve Lillywhite is far better of a person to say that. Now, again, if he didn't really like the album all that much, fine. But there's a difference between somebody, and this is where media and my knowledge and experience comes into play. There's a big difference between Steve Lillywhite doing an interview and somebody saying, "Steve, what'd you think of Come Tomorrow?" And he says, "Well, this is what I thought about it." Fair game. But in the midst of nobody asking him, nobody bringing it up, and him just offering an opinion, it looks like sour grapes. Now, look, much like everybody who asks me, perhaps he's been getting inundated with tweets and everything else, and he thought, well, here's my chance to say. Maybe that's what happened. It's entirely possible. But again, if that's me and I'm sitting next to Steve, I'm saying, you know what? Maybe just don't say that. Save it for an interview. By the way, if I'm doing an interview with Steve Lillywhite and he dumps all over the new Dave Matthews Band record that he's not a part of, as a fan, I'm like, ugh, I wish this didn't happen. But as somebody in the media, I'm like, wow, this is a big chunk that people are going to want to hear. You know what I mean? Like, give that to somebody. Let's just put it on your Twitter. The relationship between these two entities obviously is quite storied. But just to illustrate it quickly here, I went back to an NPR interview that Steve did back in 2008, where they discussed, this is Steve on World Cafe on NPR. We thank them. Discussing coming together with the band and basically in a nutshell delivering sort of their status on their relationship together.
So I phoned up the A&R guy and I said, look, I've got to come and see them. He said, well, the band have pretty much decided on their producer. I said, let me come. It's in my head. I have to produce this band. So I flew over to New York and went to see them at the old Irving Plaza and went out with Dave that night and with the producer who was supposed to be doing the record, who I won't say who it was, but he was in a band I have produced as well. And we all went out. So I'm friendly with him, but
I didn't know this, by the way. Did you know that? I knew that there was another producer. I didn't know who it was. By the way, if you know who it is, please let me know in the comments. I didn't know who it was. And I also didn't know that Steve was kind of friendly with them. That's a little awkward, edging out your buddy, somebody that you've worked with, to get in on the gig. That's intense. That's a competitive person right there.
All's fair in love and war. And I just convinced Dave that I was the man for him. And that started a really intense relationship I had with him. And we went through a lot of things together. And, 4 albums, 3 3/4 albums anyway. We became very close.
So there you go. Intense, right? How many, if somebody goes, hey, how's your marriage going? Oh, it's intense. You're like, ooh. Lovely, amazing, inspiring. These are all wonderful ways to describe a relationship. Intense, not the greatest way, but at least he's being honest. But it was obviously an intense relationship. We also do know that Boyd was, I think this is kind of common knowledge, but Boyd was pretty close with Steve. Not to say that there's side taking going on here. But I do know from it, reading interviews in the past that Boyd has said he, admires Steve in a big way. Used to sit in the studio and watch him produce. That is sort of where, when Boyd started Crystal Garden and started doing all these things, it was, it wasn't born out of nothing. It was, the guy does have a love for producing, and he picked up a lot of, imagine getting that education from the, forget it, U2 and David Byrne, and go down the laundry list of people that Steve Lillywhite produced. It's amazing. It's no better person to learn from than Steve Lillywhite. But there's an example by his own admission that these two entities, had an intense relationship. And when I think about Dave, even most recently going back prior to Come Tomorrow, and I hated when he did this, but he did it over the last couple of records, saying like that wasn't the sound or we didn't quite get it right. That always bugged me because I enjoy every one of their albums for a different reason, some more than others, obviously. But, to be like, yeah, we didn't get that right. I hated that. And he never said I hated it. But, to dump on it, to be like, it wasn't good. Like, I loved it. To be like, that's not us, that's not our sound, or we didn't quite get it right. I understand the personal frustration in him as the creator, but, there's tons of people that bought it, that loved it, that supported it, So I never really liked that. And I was surprised when Dave did it on Away from the World, because I thought it was a great record, and I was super excited when I found out that Lillywhite and them had put it all back together, and they were going to work together. And I was equally surprised, and again disappointed when as Come Tomorrow is ramping up, he's in interviews. Dave is talking about it wasn't really what we wanted to accomplish. But it just goes to show that when times were good during the first three, all the way to the Lillywhite sessions when everything crumbled and fell apart, to making up and putting it back together again on Away from the World, there's always been sort of that thing between those two entities, Dave and the band and Steve Lillywhite on this side. And it's tough. You have the writer, and you ask any producer, and it's not uncommon for the writers and performers to, sort of butt heads with the producer, and a person who is quote unquote in charge. It's like any sports fan can, understand the superstar doesn't necessarily always get along with the coach. They both have their roles. They're not going to always agree. If it all goes well, you win the championship. If it doesn't go well, coach gets fired, player gets traded, right? I mean, it's not an uncommon thing. But again, I hearken back to, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I also take issue with this idea of firsts and not letting go of the past. There's a feeling that comes about on a first. Your first kiss, your first date, right? First time you ever had a Twinkie, whatever it is. You're always going to think fondly back on that moment. And no matter how hard you try, much like a drug addict, you're never, ever going to get back to that. There's a reason why the firsts are a big deal. It's the surprise. It's the unknown. It's the intrigue. It's the excitement, right? Think about your first kiss. Kiss my wife every day now. It's not that big of a deal. It's almost taken for granted. That first kiss, though, was like, you're never, ever going to recreate that. And I wish that people would realize that a little bit more, because I feel like it's one of the faults in the human system. It's the reason why historically you look at any musician and there's a massive fall off during some of them album 2, some of them album 4 or 5. You hear people talk about Paul McCartney's the greatest songwriter ever. Oh, yeah, well, he just wrote a whole bunch of new songs. Oh, I don't like that. I like his new early stuff. Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Van Morrison, Dave Matthews. You go down the line of people that just abandon artists because they could never recapture that feeling of what they felt like the first time they heard them, or when they heard them in high school, or whatever the case is. But I feel like you'll enjoy life, you'll enjoy artists more if you realize we're never going to recreate that first feeling. I can wholeheartedly agree. The first time I heard Under the Table, first time Crash, and Before These Crowded Streets, unbelievable. I love Come Tomorrow more than anything. You can go to WEHM.com right now, see my list of the top albums of 2018. They're number 2 on the list. They only got beat out by Nathaniel Rateliff because I'm totally obsessed with that record. It's really good if you haven't heard it. But if it wasn't for that record, Come Tomorrow would have been number 1 for me. I love that album. It's great. Does it give me the feeling of what it felt like to listen to Before These Crowded Streets for the first time? No way. Does it mean that I don't go to Come Tomorrow when I'm out of the studio and do whatever? No, it doesn't. I go to Come to Tomorrow. I like that. I love that record. But there's a difference. There's an advantage that Before These Crowded Streets has, that Crash has, that Under the Table Dreaming has. They were the first times. We were just getting into this band. They were just revolutionizing this sound that none of us had ever really heard before. And you're never going to replace that. How many people honestly listened to Every Day, hated it, and now here we are 20 years later, and you're like, boy, you know what's good is that So Right track. That really came around and grew on me. I remember the first time I realized that it was cool to hate Every Day. Because when that came out, I was like, this isn't what I'm used to, but I really like it. I'm not bragging on being an originator on loving that record, but let's be honest with each other. I see a lot more fans of that album today than I did when that record first came out. A lot more. And I don't know if it's, grown on people through some of the live recordings or whatever the case may be, but, it's just case in point. You gotta know and understand you're never going to repeat the firsts, and that extra feeling that makes these things so special to you, is really the only ingredient that's missing from what makes music now so special to you. Do you know what I'm saying? There was some more follow-up on Steve Lillywhite from the fans. And to his credit, he went in there and he answered the questions. He really answered the questions. From El Tiger, sorry. If you think this band has become less unique, I hope you don't produce any records for any other band going forward. And Steve responded, I have high standards, and DMB in 1994 surpassed those standards. Sarah, been listening to this nonstop lately, a very refreshing sound, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like the band is happy. Boyd is gone. One person can also destroy a band. And Steve's response, it is never easy. Sure, it's never easy to be in a band, but wouldn't you prefer a happy band over a band that's miserable and could, by all intents and purposes, stop doing what you love? I'd prefer the happy band. If you're asking me to choose from happy band and Come Tomorrow versus misery and possibly breaking up, who doesn't choose happy band? Even though it is losing a major entity like Boyd, which, given his circumstances is a whole different thing. But when you look at Leroy, it's like there's no argument. There's no room for interpretation there. He's never going to be a part of the band again, unless they dig up some old material, which is possible. But again, it's like crying over spilled milk. Going back to his original point, dude, never. And even if all 5 members were still intact, it's still never going to be like it was during those first 3 records. It's just not, for all the reasons that I've already laid out. Brian writes, Roy and Boyd aren't coming back. The band has evolved, and so has their sound. The band sounded awesome this summer. Steve, to his credit, said they will always be a great live band. By the way, Steve he's been critical of the band before. He's openly admitted to being like a big punk artist. He's openly said in interviews, I don't think people really pay attention to them when they're live. He's like, he has said, and I'm quoting here, I go to see them, and an hour in, I'm like, he made that noise, saying that he's bored. So, he never hides his feelings, which I give him credit for. But again, you're not contributing. You're not being nice, really. What's the point of saying it? Perhaps the absolute best retort comes from Stefan Lessard, who just simply wrote Leroy, correcting Steve's spelling, which is, I'm not one of these, spelling people who go around correcting, you write there, the wrong way. I'm not going to jump on you for it. I could care less. But if you have this tight bond with this band and this community and this person, you should probably know how to spell that person's name. That's kind of a big deal. Stefan just kind of let it stand there. That was his response, Leroy. I think we kind of know where Stefan stands on this. And if you're Stefan, I think, you'd be like, what the hell, man? Again, we all know the situation. We all know that Leroy's passed and Boyd's dealing with his things. And, why even bring this up? There's nothing productive that can come from it. Mark Backson, by the way, chimed into Stefan's response saying, congrats on you guys' immense success in 2018. And then he attached a chart for the top 10 best-selling albums in 2018, and Come Tomorrow creeping in on that list at number 9. So again, you're going to dump all over an album in an era where people aren't even consuming albums anymore. Number 9. How many albums do you think was put out in 2018? Thousands, tens of thousands, 20, 40, 100,000. How many albums were put out? Number 9. I mean, it just doesn't, to me, again, it just doesn't make you look good in that scenario. Somebody asks you about it, you agree to an interview, and that was one of the questions. By all means, go answer it. To offer it up out of nowhere, to me, seems a little like sour grapes. It just seems like sour grapes to me. I love Steve Lillywhite. I think the magic they produced together was amazing. I think his sound and influence on Away from the World was great and appreciated. I like that record. I like the songs on that album. But I liked Big Whiskey. And I found nothing wrong with Come Tomorrow. Come Tomorrow had a really crisp, clean sound, man. Not a lot of those muddled, atmospheric sounds that Steve's kind of known for. And that's okay. That's what I like. It's different. It's evolving. It's always new. I will always have the first 3. I can always put them on and relive it. It's just, that's the only way to do it. You're never going to get that from one of the new records. It's going to be a new and different experience. Because the thing is Under the Table and Dreaming didn't have Under the Table and Dreaming to compete with. You know what I mean? Crash didn't have Before These Crowded Streets to compete with. We got those 3 really fast before we knew what was going on, and that became law, right? That became the law. And then from there, everything else had to live up to that. And then what became the story? This is not as good. That's not as good. This is not as good. I'm just not interested in that. I'm really just not interested in that whatsoever. I want to see what you're going to say next as a musician. That's what I'm interested in. And if it sticks with me, it sticks with me. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. I respect the people that say they don't like Come Tomorrow. That's cool with me. But I have a feeling that if you're really honest with yourself, you're going to realize, forget all the circumstances surrounding this album. Take the album for what it's worth, a group of songs together. It's not that bad. Because again, if we rewind back in time and we go to all the people that were like, this band sucks now, too poppy, I hate this, go back to Unplugged, Dave. Plugging in was the worst thing that ever happened because there was a ton of those people, right? How many of those people, and again, I'm not here to poll anybody or, you be honest with yourself. How many of those people here in 2019 are like, boy, you know what? This was pretty good. I know I dumped all over this one, but this one's not that bad. Because I don't know many people that hate When the World Ends. I still love So Right. I think the Folsom, the Colorado records, that song's never been better. And it's not that far off from the original recording, right? I mean, you just go up and down every day as staple as a staple can get in their repertoire. And I don't see people leaving the arena area when that thing gets played. I see people up and dancing and going crazy. And again, Every Day is such a great, the fact that Every Day and 36 eventually got merged together, to me is more proof than anything. Relax. It's all okay. It's all going to be good. You didn't have to choose between those two because that was the conversation at the time too. Every Day sucks, just play 36. You can't make some of these rule people happy. Look at the song and what it morphed into eventually. A whole, they took the best of both and put it out, and it was great. So before we get on our high horses of this sucks, and go back to the old. Just let the music be what it is and enjoy it. And if you don't, cool. You know. I saw a similar thing when and again, speaking of first, like here's a great example, the Backson sessions, right? The Backson sessions. We got over the Backson sessions like this. The Lillywhite sessions was like a 3-year ordeal. Till the time Busted Stuff came out. That was all we obsessed over it. Similar leak, we were over it like that. You know, you go back to the Lillywhite sessions and you had this leak. You had the Napster element to it. You had message boards really coming into their own. There were a lot of firsts there that made that so exciting. You had almost an exact same scenario with the Backson sessions, and we're all like, we moved on pretty quickly, right? You can't go back to those firsts. You just can't. But I saw the people that were like, oh, the Backson sessions is so much better than Come Tomorrow. Is it? Is it? Because I listened to both, and I just saw another group of some pretty good songs. You know, I just listened to another group going, man, how could they let this sit on the shelf when they put out the other stuff? No. You know, come on. To me, is personal opinion, greatest song they've put out in the last 2 or 3 years. To me, Come On, greatest song this band has put out since Why I Am. And again, not to take anything away from the world, but Why I Am, to me, like, when I hear that song, I put that song up against anything on the first three. Anything. When I heard Why I Am, that to me was like first time I heard Gray Street, first time I heard Ants Marching. You know, that to me is just one of my favorite songs. It's just so great. It has everything I love in it. Everything. You know? Great lyrics, wonderful song, the meaning behind it, Leroy and everything else, just phenomenal. I didn't sit there and go, man, this, it's not on the first three. Sucks. It's just, you got to open yourself up to it a little bit more, I think. But again, if you're like, and I open myself up, I listen to it, I just don't like that album, I think it sucks. Cool. It's cool, man. That's your thing, But I think, not to say everybody, but I think even with the best intentions, sometimes we do get hung up on our firsts a bit too much. It is what it is. Make sure you guys subscribe. Appreciate the support as always. I truly do mean that. We cover a lot of music on EHM, but by far, the love we get from the DMB family is massively huge. Massively huge. So I want to thank you guys for that. Make sure you share. And again, check out the morning show vlog, wehm.com, our channel, the playlist that we have. We've done a lot on DMB, Fleetwood Mac, Steely Dan, the upcoming festivals, Woodstock. By the way, DMB added to Jazz Fest, which is incredible. How Woodstock is going to surpass that Jazz Fest lineup is beyond me, because to me, Woodstock has to be the festival of 2019. Woodstock, original cultural event of the 60s. Cultural event of the century. You can't put up Woodstock 50 and not be better than Coachella's lineup that year, or Bonnaroo, or in this case, what I think is the best lineup we've seen so far, Jazz Fest. Truly crazy. Truly crazy good. Thanks for watching.